Hello, my name is Christina. I'm one of your elections team for 2021. Today we're going to talk through question time, what that is and how to prepare for it. So what we're going to cover today is what is question time and what does that mean in this new virtual world. We're going to look at the science behind stage fright and how to overcome fears and nerves around public speaking. We're going to look at some preparation techniques for the session itself, as well as for answering the questions. And the bit you've all been waiting for, we're going to give you a sneak peek at some of the questions we're going to ask during question time. So, what is question time? So essentially, question time is your chance to answer questions from students and questions about the role and what you're going to do in the role if you were to become elected. It's a pre-recorded session this year and it's going to be done via Zoom. So we'll invite you along on the 1st of March at 4 o'clock if you're a co-president and the 2nd of March at 4 p.m. if you're a co-vice president's campus experience and equality candidate. You'll have 5 questions to answer, and they will all be the same for each of the candidates. And you'll get 20 seconds per question. We'll give you those questions in advance. And like I said, today you'll get 3 of them. And we'll release the other 2 for each sets of candidates by the end of the week. We then record this video and it gets released on the 8th of March, 6 p.m, which you should all know is the start of voting. So, things to think about. We're going to be recording this on Zoom and it's going to include your faces, so you'll need to have a working camera and a working mic. We're going to have a look at how to set that up and things to think about to make sure you've got the best setup possible. During that Zoom session, we will spotlight you or pin you to make sure you're the only one speaking for your 20 seconds. We are going to edit this video, so it's going to be cut down and changed so it's a seamless transition from question to question and candidate to candidate. So don't worry too much about it being perfection. What we're going to do is we may split the questions as well. So make sure your answers stand alone. So don't use things like previously or in my previous answer. They might be standalone videos. So really think about that. So over to Chris to talk about how to set yourself up.
Hi there, I'm Chris and I'm going to be meeting you very soon for your candidate filming session. I wanted to throw together a very quick video just to give you a few things to think about when it comes to where you should be and considerations to keep in mind when it comes to filming your own videos. The vast majority of you are going to be connecting to your Zoom sessions on your phones or on your laptops. So these are just a few things that you should consider in advance of connecting to that call. The first thing is to make sure if you're using your phone to film horizontally. The second thing to consider is that if your Zoom session is during the daylight hours, to use natural light. So if you can, sit yourself next to a window and switch off any lights in your room. Natural light is way more flattering than artificial light. The second tip is to consider background noise. So again, if you can, pick a room which is relatively quiet in your home, so away from housemates or parents, wherever you're living, and also away from like TVs or anything that might be causing a bit of background noise. Another audio consideration is that if you know that your device's microphone isn't that great, consider using earphones. Try to keep your background clear. This just helps to keep the focus on you rather than what's going on in the background. Another thing to consider is something called the rules of thirds. So all you really need to do is just to make sure that you're positioned in the center of your screen. Another thing to consider is having your phone level. So having your eye line lined up with the camera, as opposed to kind of shooting up like this or down like this. You'll also want to make sure that your camera is stabilized, so it's rest against something and you're not holding it in selfie mode. All I've done here, look, is I've just put my camera up against some books and then sit against my laptop. Obviously, this isn't a problem if you are using a laptop, but if you're using your phone, make sure that your camera is elevated so that the camera again is at your eye level as opposed to looking up or looking down. And the final thing to consider is to make sure that you're looking at your camera as opposed to yourself. So here, I'm looking at myself on the screen, which is what most people do. And this doesn't matter when I'm on the call with you, but when we get to recording your videos, make sure that your eye line is looking at the camera so that you connect directly with the audience. So here I'm looking at the camera with an iPhone, there's a little green light that comes up so you know exactly where to look. And that's it, nice and simple. I'll look forward to seeing you soon on our Zoom session.
So those are some things to think about when you're setting up on Zoom, and you might want to get on a video call beforehand just to check out those settings and make sure you're happy with your setup. So don't leave it to the last minute. We will send that video around to you again, so you can come back to it as well on its own.
Hi there, I'm Chris.
So looking at stage fright and the sort of science behind stage fright. So I really advise that you go away and have a look at this TED Talk. It's a short 4-minute video about the science behind stage fright. In essence, stage fright is normal, and there's lots of ways you can overcome nerves. So how you can do that, before you press record and before we go to record, get a bit of perspective. Stage fright is normal, being nervous is normal, and that's a natural thing. So get some perspective. It's not the end of the world if it all goes wrong. It's also pre-recorded, so we can do it again if it goes totally right. But also those nerves, it's excitement. You want to do this. So refocus it, refocus your mind on the task ahead. Practice, practice, practice. Practice what you're going to say, practice being on camera and having to look at yourself in a camera, and practice how you want to feel, what things are around you and things like that. Stretch. Make sure you take time beforehand to stretch it out, to get a real relaxed body before we start the session. And another top tip is reduce your caffeine, so your caffeine intake. So caffeine also increases the adrenaline going around in your body. So it increases all those sort of symptoms of being nervous and stage fright. So sweaty palms, a racing heart. So try and not drink coffee or anything else with caffeine in before the session. And during the record, make sure you take time to breathe. So you're breathing down, try and calm your body down. Try and overcome all those symptoms of that racing heart during that session. Take a chance to pause. We say you've got 20 seconds. That doesn't mean you can't pause before you start speaking and saying what you want to say. So pause nicely. Make sure you've got some water with you for the session. So in between your questions or your answers, you can have a nice drink and calm yourself down, clear your throat. It's very normal to get sort of a dry mouth, so make sure you've got some water there as well. And pick a focus. It's harder to do virtually, but try and make eye contact with someone else in the call, whether that's a staff member who'll be on screen or another candidate or a buddy you want. Just make contact and focus in on one person. You might also want to think about sort of having some coping mechanisms. So you'll see I use my hands a lot, but when I'm nervous, I've got rings on and I tend to twist and play with my rings. As long as that's off camera, really doesn't matter, and as long as it's not noisy. So feel free to have something to help you cope, whether that's a little stress ball, which you can sort of use to cope off camera or in between each of your answers. So moving on to preparing your answers now, you've prepared yourself. Don't leave it to the last minute. So we're releasing the questions early to give you a chance to go away, do some research, to practice what you want to write. So use that time wisely, think about it. It's also a good idea to know your audience. You don't want to limit who you're speaking to. We've got over 16,500 students at UOB. You don't want to focus on one particular group or your group of friends to try and get votes. We've got a lot of mature students, we've got students from different campuses, so you don't want to limit your answer. So if you've got an answer and say you're only focused on the metro, you're missing out on 8,000 students who don't go to Luton, who probably don't even know what the metro is. So make sure you think about who you're trying to speak to. You've only got 20 seconds, so pick one idea per question and stick to it. You don't want to go off on lots of different tangents and things like that. Stick to one idea, one key idea, and really bring that home of what you want to get across. Find a delivery method that works for you. Some of you might want to completely script out your 20 seconds of exactly word for word what you're going to say. Some of you might want to bullet point it, so these are the things I need to cover. And some of you might just want to do it from memory. So it might be that you go, actually, I know I've got these things to cover, and when I do it, I'm going to just go for it there and then. Find a method that works for you. If you are doing things like that, like script writing or bullet points, make sure you put that somewhere where you can read it without looking away from the camera. So I've got a second screen at the moment, so I don't want it on my second screen, so I'm looking over here. I want it in front of me, so I can still look at the camera whilst I'm reading it. So think about the size of the text as well. So you might want bigger writing so you can read it really clearly, or you might want it sort of slightly beyond the screen, so you can still look into the camera whilst reading it. So think about those things. Have a timer with you. If it calms you down to have something that's timing down so you know how quickly you need to go or how much time you've got left, do that. Make sure it's in front of you again. Make sure it's clear and you're not having to look away at a different device or things like that to see the time. And practice, practice, practice. We've all lived in this virtual world now for nearly a year, but it's still a bit weird looking at yourself on camera. So get used to it. Go online, use different devices to talk to people and practice saying what you're going to say and how you're going to answer those questions. So, how long is 20 seconds? 20 seconds is only about 40 to 50 words, depending on how fast you speak. So I can probably tell you about whether I prefer cats to dogs, but I probably can't go into the ins and outs of which breeds I prefer and why I prefer each of those breeds. So think about what you want to say and be really concise in the words you want to use. It's probably, as you can see from that bit of text, only about 2 sentences. 2 or 3 sentences, absolute max. So don't go overboard, don't write us an essay, keeping these nice and short and sweet. So students don't get bored and go off and do something else. So make sure your key point is right at the start, so we don't miss it, and make sure you don't push yourself to the limit, so you're running out of time. We tend to speed up when we're nervous as well, so think about that. Think about having something to slow yourself down and make sure you're still understandable. And we don't want to be speaking at this speed, just try and put it in because people won't understand that. Okie dokie, so last but not least, the questions. So each set of candidates will have the same questions, so everyone will be asked the same questions. There's no individual questions here. So for co-presidents, it will be about why is it important to have gender balance within the officer team? So this year with the new positions, we're very much talking about having much more gender balance. So we'll ask you about why you think that's important. What do you believe is the biggest educational change that needs to happen at UOB? So looking about people's academic experience, their course experience, rather than their wider student experience, and really focusing down on sort of course level stuff. And then the third question is, student voice is central to the work of EdSU. How will you ensure student feedback is heard? So that's looking at you in particular. How are you going to make sure students are heard? And like I said, the last 2 questions will get released later in the week for you, but you will get those before those sessions. For co-vice presidents, your 3 initial questions are: UOB has several campuses all over the country. What's the one thing you would do to make students on these campuses feel like they're part of the SU? So the UOB has 9 campuses at the moment, which we have, as an SU, have members on, and they are all across the country. So think about how we might make them feel as one. Your second question: UOB has a diverse student population, some of which are historically disadvantaged. How will you be an ally to students from disadvantaged backgrounds in your role? So really good word to look up, ally or allyship. Make sure you have a Google of what that means, and how you are going to be a better ally to students from disadvantaged groups. And then lastly, fostering student communities is key to being successful in this role. How might you go about doing this? So think about different student communities, whether that's an academic student community, whether that's a social student community, whether that's a campus community, and there's lots of different communities of students. So think about how you might go about fostering those. And again, your last 2 questions will be released later this week, but you will still get a chance to pre-prepare those. And that is it for today's session. If you do have any questions, please get in touch with either the elections team, either via the Teams or by emailing elections@beds.ac.uk.